my name is Ali Naqvi. I'm part of the solution architecture team here at Vulcan. And today what we'll talk about is how you could really utilize the Vulcan platform to analyze risk and what you could do from an actionable steps perspective to reduce that risk. Now, before we get started, there's two main metrics you really need to understand from the Vulcan's platform's perspective. The first is SPR, which is the security posture rating. And what the security posture rating really is, it's a risk of a group of assets based on an internal benchmark. And this is more of a qualitative approach to understanding your risk of your overall environment. And so you basically go in and set a internal benchmark or a threshold. Right now, my threshold at 70%. And then we calculate all the risk for every asset in your environment. And then based on that, we tell you, where do you stand? So from here in my environment, my threshold is set, or my risk appetite is set to the 70%, which is below high and critical. And you can see that out of all my assets, 87% meet that requirement. So I'm at moderate risk, but there's still 13% of my assets, which is about 3,800 assets that I have, that are still in risk. So again, a good way of understanding the overall security posture based on a threshold or risk appetite, and that risk appetite is configurable. You could go in, and if you meet your risk at a certain point, you could go in and change that to even lower to get your overall security posture at a better rate. The next metric really is around risk mass. And what risk mass really is, it's a quantitative approach to understanding risk mass of your environment, of your different attack surfaces. And the attack surfaces could be assets, it could be OSs, it could be vulnerabilities, it could be business groups, and we'll talk about all these terms in a little bit. But the reason we really created this metric was we found that most tools utilize averages and weighted averages to analyze risk, which could be misleading. If you have a number of assets and one of the asset that you decide to remediate is below the average, your overall risk will actually go up, even though you remediated something, which again is misleading. So with risk mass, what we do is we do accumulation for all the assets in your environment. And even if you now go in and remediate the lowest risk asset, the risk mass will get updated based on that, the right sense that it needs to. With Vulcan, one of the things that we do, or the first thing that we do, is we ingest data from multiple tools out there. And you can see that I'm connecting to a number of different tools: Qualys, Tenable, Rapid7, ServiceNow, and then some of the cloud native tools like Prisma Cloud. You can see that from a raw data perspective, I'm ingesting 45,000 raw assets and over 250,000 vulnerabilities just from Qualys. Now, you'll ask, how do we actually ingest this data, and what type of data do we ingest? You can see that we have a list for over 50 connectors that are out there, and the connectors are ranging from cloud connectors, AWS, Azure, GCP, more the SaaS and DaaS type of connectors, SCA connectors as well. And then we also do your traditional scanning tools like Qualys and Tenable and Rapid7, and then also more around the cloud native type of tools as well. So things like Wiz and Aqua and Prisma Cloud, we're able to ingest those data within the tool itself. So now what happens when we ingest the data? The next thing we could see that from an asset reduction perspective, you see that we have over 12,000 raw assets that we pulled into the system. And then when we deduped and merged the different assets, and this merge could happen based on MAC address, it could be based on IP address, it could be based on FQDN, regex, many things that we could utilize to really start doing the merging of the data. You can see that from the raw assets to unique assets, we deduped and merged it down to 29,000. And then we finally went further and prioritized those assets, and we ended up with a little bit over 3,000. So if I look at my assets here, you can see a number of different assets that are here. You could see the name, you could see the OS type. But the more interesting part here is we found that there was an asset or a CI available in ServiceNow, and then that same asset was scanned by Qualys. So we merged the two data down, and you can see now information in one line item for that particular asset type. So you can see when it last scanned, you could see the maximum risk score, you could see the risk mass associated with it, and the number of vulnerabilities it has. So I could dive in to this particular asset and you could see all the different vulnerabilities that are associated with this particular asset. You could see how we actually calculate risk within Vulcan. We look at three things. We look at the technical severity score, which tells you how technically, how technical that a particular vulnerability is. We correlate that with threat intel. So we connect to a number of different threat intel, things like exploit DB, Metasploit, NVD, MITRE CVE. And we're looking to see if there's any existing malware campaign, if it's part of the OWASP top 10. And we correlate that data into the overall calculation. And finally, the third thing we really look at is your business context. So how does it impact your business? And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. So with that, let's go back and see a little bit around business group. So the first thing we could do to ingest your business context is to look at tags that are coming in from different types of tools. So very easily we could go in and ingest tags, and this could be automated as well as done manually. You can see I have a number of different tags in my Tenable environment. I could go in and pull in my production K8 Kubernetes business tags coming in from Tenable. You have the ability to go in and add an SLA, and this SLA could be specific to this particular business group. The SLA could be at a global level. And then I have the ability to go in and add an impact score. And based on the impact that you add, the overall risk score or calculation will be impacted by this. And then we have the ability to go and change this into a business group. Now, business groups within the Vulcan platform, if you choose to make this tag a business group, you'll be able to do RBAC. So you could, for this particular business group, you could tie this to RBAC. You could also have the ability to tie it into analytics. And then you could also do deep searches within the different areas within the Vulcan platform for business groups as well. So that's how you take a tag and you make it into a business group. We could also create these business groups by hand or in detail. So based on our base criteria, whether it be a naming convention, a subnet, a tag, or save searches, I have the ability to go in and say anything in my cloud, that has cloud in my naming convention to create a business group out of. Now, again, this could be an application that you create. This could be a finance application, external facing application. It could be based off of a OS type. So this could be all my Linux servers. This could be all my Unix servers. But the idea is now I could, based on a cloud, you could see that it goes across the different asset types. So I could see all my hosts associated with it, all my code projects and SCA associated with this, anything that has to do with images and my cloud native applications and my cloud resources. Now you have the ability to take that across assets and make one business group out of it and go in and assign an impact score to this, right? So this is cloud is going to be a high impact for me, and I could go in and save this. As I mentioned, that from our perspective, not only infrastructure and hosts we could actually see all this information around any of your code projects and SCA based on the different scanners that are doing the scanning. Same thing for pen testing, bug bounties. So the different types of scanners that you have, things like Burp Suite and Fortify will allow you to get some of these pen testing information and vulnerabilities associated with them. We can ingest that data. If you're looking at more of the cloud native type of applications, things like images and registries, we could scan those through different types of tools like Wiz and other tools that are out there that we connect to. And also from a cloud resource perspective, we have the ability to connect and pull in information for cloud resources, CSPM type of tools like Wiz and Aqua that are out there to do the merging and correlation work. So if I go back to my dashboard here, let's look at some of the ways you could really take actionable information and take action based on what you see. So here we have a heat map of all the different business groups that are created in my environment, and based on the size of the box, which is the risk mass and the SPR, I'm able to very quickly ascertain where I need to focus in on for my business groups. So you can see this Linux team business group has a 12 million plus risk mass, but my SPR is pretty good. It's at 88%. So what I should really be focusing on is the ones that are getting to the darker orange or red, which is actually high or critical. where I'm seeing that for this particular critical Windows external facing application business group that I have, which has a risk mass of 429,000, the assets in there are, none of them are meeting my overall security posture rating or my risk appetite that I have set. So I should be really focusing on those business groups to see what the vulnerabilities are and how I could get them to the level of posture rating that I need them to be. Let's focus now a little bit on the vulnerabilities. So once we ingest the data, merge the data, dedupe the data, we start looking at vulnerabilities, and we associate those vulnerabilities to assets, and those are called vulnerable instances within Vulcan. And within the tool now, I could go in and start going in and merging that data down from the raw vulnerabilities to prioritize vulnerabilities. And what I have here is how I could actually look at that prioritized data and vulnerability data and really take out all the noise from there. So you can see very quickly, I could see how many critical vulnerabilities I have. Very quickly, I could go in and see how many high vulnerabilities I have. And also with my threat intel, I could take out some of that noise and kind of understand where I should be focusing on. So if I want to see only things that are exploitable, there's, here, I could go in and see there's over 25,000 exploitable vulnerabilities in my system today. I could go in further and say, hey, I want to see what CISA has said and the things that I should be focusing on. I could go in and see that and narrow that down from 25,000 to 400 vulnerabilities that I should be looking at. And then also our security research team on a daily basis looks at all the high CVEs that are out there that as an organization I should be looking and keeping an eye on. And we're able to go in and see all those hot CVEs very quickly. And then also I have the ability to, you see I have a widget here for Log4Shell, which is on top of mind for most customers today. I'm very quickly now, again, this is Log4Shell today. Now, as the next big thing comes out, Vulcan will replace this Log4Shell widget with another widget based on what's out there. Very quickly now, I could go in and track anything that has to do with Log4Shell. And I could go in and based on a click very quickly see that it narrowed down to 24 vulnerabilities, 7 of them are critical. And each of these now I could go in and look at in more detail and take some action. Let's go back and let's talk a little bit around the 20 hot or the hot vulnerabilities that the Vulcan research team has said that are important. Now, again, I could go in and see these 49 hot vulnerabilities or CVEs that I should be looking at. Again, taking out all the noise, I see there are 3 critical ones that I should really focus in on based on what the Vulcan research team has picked out within my environment. I could go now look at the details of this vulnerability. You could see that the CVSS score is 7.8, which is a high vulnerability. But from a Vulcan score perspective, we've actually increased that to a 96. So now, why did we increase that? When we looked at the threat intels, we saw that it was an exploitable vulnerability, which again makes it a little bit more critical. But also, when we looked at your business context, right, the assets and the tags, the business groups that we created, this vulnerability was impacting 2 different business groups or tags in my environment. That now really makes it very important based on the business context, right? So that's why the score has increased to 96, which is critical within Vulcan. We'll give you some relevant information around the CVEs, the packages that are impacted, the CWEs. We'll also show you from a threat intel perspective, all the links where we found this particular vulnerability with all the internal threat intel that we utilize with Vulcan. We will also give you the life cycle of this vulnerability on the different assets that it's impacting. So you can see this particular vulnerability is in progress in all these 4 different assets. We will also show you if it goes from in progress to fixed, it will also be updated here. And then also from a fixed perspective, we have the ability to go in and show you fixes from the individual scanners. So we'll show you that type of information. We will also utilize our remediation intelligence database. Again, this is a database that is very specific to Vulcan. We go out on a regular basis and we have machine learning algorithms that go into security advisories. We do some data scraping, indexing, and also go to code repos and pull down all the vulnerabilities and the fixes. We also have our own security research team going and updating this database with workarounds and compensating controls. So with that, we've actually done the correlation for this particular security update for our pull kit on this particular CentOS. What are the things that we could do to fix it? And then we all automatically generate Ansible, Chef, and Puppet scripts that you could download to actually fix that vulnerability on that particular Linux OS. Now, typically, from a security point of view, you don't have access to those assets. You need to actually get those assets, that information to the right asset owner and tell them to actually fix this vulnerability. Most of the time, these guys are either security, they're in operations. For instance, this CentOS was probably owned by some operations person, which was doing his day job of making sure those servers are up and running at all times. You sending them an information around, hey, here's a patch that you need to do, is going to be last on his mind. So how do you actually get them to do more and help patch and remediate some of these things? Is you actually do a lot of the work for them. So we've done all the correlation work. We've done what they need to do to actually do the fixing, and we could connect to tools like ServiceNow or Jira and orchestrate this information out to that asset owner. So very quickly, I could open up a Jira ticket. I could embed the scripts in there. I could choose the project that I want to assign this to. All this information comes through the connectors that we connect to. We could also go in and choose, give it a title. So we could go in and say, this is for the poll kit vulnerability. You can see that all the relevant information that this asset owner is going to need to actually fix this vulnerability is already there. So description of the vulnerability, it tells you all the assets that are being impacted, and it also tells you the remedies as well. You could choose which assets are going to get this particular vulnerability. So you could go in and choose a specific asset type that's going to get it. You could also go in and if there are multiple remediations, you could choose which remediation you want on it. And from here, I could go in and open up the ticket. Now, let's go back into my dashboard here, and I want to talk about another concept here called remediation campaigns. Now, any actions that I've taken, like the one I just took and opening up a ticket, will get tracked by a campaign. So we monitor the life cycle of that vulnerability, which is very important because most of the time, as a security analyst, you're going in and trying to call and email and figure out if the vulnerability has actually been fixed on the particular asset. Within the Vulcan platform, you have the ability to track that end to end from the time that vulnerability or you took that action of sending that vulnerability to the asset owner till it gets fixed. And so you can see very quickly, I have 107 open active campaigns. I have now, if you want to go and analyze that through risk mass, you could see that how many of those campaigns are impacting your overall risk mass. You can see I have 9.1% of those are impacting based on a manual campaign that's open. We have the ability to do automated campaign as well. 8.7% are from automated campaigns, and I'll talk about the automation a little bit more from a campaign perspective. But you can see that I've taken over 3,200 actions, and out of that, 3.2 million risk mass has been impacted. And then also, I could very quickly understand the top 5 highest impacting campaigns and the risk mass associated with them. So from here, I could go and actually see the campaign. I could go in and very quickly understand from a Jira perspective, which of those are breaching, which of them are not breaching. So here are my vulnerabilities, just an example. You can see I could go into the different tickets as well in Jira and open it up straight in Jira as well. But the vulnerabilities I could see based on asset type, based on the vulnerability. So you can see this particular vulnerability itself now has all the different assets, and it'll also have the different statuses for each of them, which of them are vulnerable, which of them are fixed. And the idea here is that as we get the scanner to come in and tell us that this particular vulnerability doesn't exist, we will move that vulnerability from in progress to fixed, and then we'll change the status to 100%. Once it reaches 100%, we'll move it to close, and we'll actually close out this Jira ticket as well. So we have a two-way connection into Jira to close out the ticket. Now, what I've shown you so far is things are very manual. You find a vulnerability, you weed out all the noise, you understand where you need to focus in on, and you go in and take an action like opening up a ticket. Now, when you start scaling out, doing things manually is not the best way to do it. You really want to start automating some of your actions. And this is where within the Vulcan platform, we have an automation capability where we could create something called a playbook. And the playbook, it basically, you would, based on a criteria, you would take certain actions automatically. And the criteria is, for instance, I could go in and say, anything that I want to go in and open up a ticket, for instance, on a critical vulnerability for a particular business group. And you could have the vulnerability coming in from a number of different scan sources. We'll leave it at tenable. You could go in and say what the criteria is, and the criteria could get pretty granular. So you could go in and say it's based on an affected vendor, affected package. You could even say for a particular CVE. You could go in and say for risk types, I could say, hey, anything that's of a critical risk within Vulcan, and let's say a threat type of exploitable. I could go in and get, again, like I said, pretty granular with what I wanted to add as far as my criteria goes. And then how, what from a host perspective, what is it going to impact? I could go in and say, based on a particular host name, a OS type, a business group. So I could go in and say, for my external facing business group here, so here's my external facing business group. And I could say, I also want to go in and tie it down to a CentOS or OS as well. So now that I've built my criteria, I could go in and say, what are the actions I want to take? And the actions could be, again, it could be a Jira ticket. It could be a ServiceNow ticket. So for instance, I'll go and show you from a ServiceNow ticket. Now, depending on how you want to open up the ServiceNow, what do you want to open up an incident? Do you want to open up a problem ticket? Do you want to have this per unique vulnerability? You want to have it per asset type or an aggregation? We have the ability to go in and fill out all the relevant information as far as where it's going, who the assignee is, what group is this going to. All this information is coming through the connector, and when we actually did the connector and connected to ServiceNow. So all the CI information, all the information around who you are able to assign it to is all coming in through the initial configuration. And then once you go in and fill out the relevant information, I could go in and post to a Slack channel or a Teams channel. So I could go in and say, post to my Slack channel that a critical vulnerability got opened up for that particular business group. And then you could also escalate based on the breaches of SLA. So I could go in and say that SLA has been breached, and if it does get breached, send me an information or an email, because I'm the one that is responsible for this particular for those particular vulnerabilities. And so you could see now how very quickly you could start automating some of your actions rather than manually going and doing things, which will really help you scale from an enterprise perspective. Two other things that I want to touch up on. One is around remedies and through our remediation intelligence database. Again, this is something that's very unique to Vulcan. And how we actually utilize this is, what are the things that I need to do? You could start asking what if type of questions around your environment to say, what are the things that I need to do that'll have the highest impact, or that could increase my SPR the most, or decrease my risk mass the most in my environment. And you could do very quick searches on those. So here you can see that I could say update this kernel version 3.1.0, and this is impacting 23 vulnerabilities and 305 of my assets. And I could go in and take an action and open up that Jira ticket or the ServiceNow ticket straight from here. Other things we could do is you could go in and, for instance, do workarounds. As I mentioned earlier, that you have the ability to do workarounds within the remediation intelligence database. This is stuff that our security engineers go in and on a daily basis try to put into the system itself. And you can see if I disable this SMB It's a workaround. There's no fix for this, but there is a workaround. And if I look at that particular fix itself or that workaround, you could see it's impacting 60 different vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities coming from multiple different types of sources on 35 of my assets. And here I could go in and take an action by either opening up a Jira or ServiceNow, or taking actions with other tools that we integrate, like with CrowdStrike or Ivanti. So that's how customers utilize the remediation intelligence database within the Vulcan platform. And finally, I want to tie this all together with how we actually provide executive type of analytics. So from an analytics perspective, in your environment, you want to see a number of different things. One being risk and how your risk is over a period of time, trending information, as well as how you're remediating some of those things. So if I go into my risk here, one of the things with the platform is we gather a lot of data for all our vulnerable instances, and we're basing off of a Snowflake platform. So we have the ability to really hold a lot of data over a period of time, and then show you trending information around this. So here I could break up, based on the asset type. I could show you the data based on different business groups that you have, but really showing you trending information around security posture rating, risk mass, and the overall number of vulnerabilities. I could break that down per business group. I could go in and show you trending information for security posture rating and risk mass, for instance, over a period of time. I could drill down further. So you can see the BI is a very up-to-date and new type of BI type of analytics, where you could go and drill down and look at the data itself and export this out as well. I could show you risk based on criticality, and for each of these, I could drill down as well, and I could break down SPR by different asset types. Also, from a remediation perspective, I have the ability to show you remediation information. So what is your mean time to remediation? Again, I could break this down by business group, by risk level, by source. I could break down the remediation workload by business group, mean time to remediation by business group as well. And I could show you how is it going over a period of time based on the days, by risk level, by asset types. I could also show you the remediation workload, meaning how many vulnerabilities are you getting versus how many are you actually remediating. So telling you what your remediation capacity is there. And again, being able to narrow this down by asset type and risk level as well. And then similar type of information around SLAs and threat intel. So really giving you the ability to understand what's happening in your environment from a risk perspective, SLA perspective, and remediation perspective. So hopefully that kind of give you an understanding of how you could really utilize the Vulcan platform to analyze risk and all the actionable steps you could take to really reduce that risk in your overall environment. And so hopefully that made sense to you guys. Thank you very much. My name is Ali Naqvi, here from Vulcan.